Hey guys, tonight we're going to start with something very close to home, memories, or more precisely, how our deepest recollections shape who we are. Tonight, we'll journey back to a turbulent time, to a distant place where youth and war intertwined, and where simple melodies could become a lifeline. So, before you feel comfortable, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always fascinating to know who's joining us on this journey from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for a gentle hum, and let's collectively ease into tonight's journey. Mr. Masaru Tanaka, with his neat, short, combed-back white hair and a face deeply etched with the lines of time, sat in his familiar brown leather armchair. The soft light from the reading lamp illuminated his face, where the deep wrinkles told a long story etched by the years. His eyes, dark, deep-set, and calm, seemed to gaze through the veil of time towards a distant, humid land where the silent truths of war still echoed. Chapter 1. The Call from a Strange Land. People often talk about gunshots, about big battles, about heroes and enemies, but few tell of the other truths of war, truths that seep into every sense, penetrate to the bone, shaping a soldier in ways no one could expect. Mr. Masaru said, his voice pensive, as if unraveling the knots of an old film reel. Michael Miller, a 20-year-old from the peaceful suburbs of Chicago, arrived in Vietnam in the 70s. He had imagined the war through movies and news, with images of brave soldiers and fierce battles. But the reality hit him like a slap to his senses. As soon as the airplane door opened, a thick, humid blast of air, heavy with diesel, sweat, and something sweet and pungent from the unfamiliar earth, hit him directly. It wasn't the smell of war, but the scent of a completely different world. It was an assault on every sense, Mr. Masaru recounted, his eyes slightly closed. The scorching heat, the humidity that made clothes cling to your skin, and those smells, they never leave you. Michael was taken to a temporary base. Even within the so-called safety of the base, the reality of life there became clear. Makeshift canvas tents, muddy dirt roads after the rain, and the incessant buzzing of cicadas mingled with the throbbing sound of helicopters overhead. He saw other soldiers, those who had been there longer. They didn't look heroic or glamorous like in the movies. They were odd, with dark circles under their eyes, and their faces bore the clear marks of hardening, something Michael couldn't yet understand. The insects were another truth. Mosquitoes buzzed endlessly, flying into his ear, biting his skin, bringing with them the worry of malaria. Fire ants crawled everywhere, and bugs of all shapes emerged from the ground. Even in his sleep, Michael felt something crawling on him. Sleep was never complete. They don't tell you about the pungent smell of fish sauce mixed with gunpowder, Mr. Masaru said, or the sound of geckos calling in the dead of night, sounding like an alien creature, or the shuddering feeling when a leech latches onto your leg after wading through a stream. Michael was an infantryman. His job was to patrol and search. He quickly learned that the enemy wasn't the only scary thing. The jungle itself was an adversary. Dense bushes could conceal anything, from a sniper to a venomous snake. Trails turned into muddy quagmires after rain, making every step a struggle. Isolation was another rarely mentioned truth. Despite being with his comrades, Michael still felt a deep loneliness. They came from different places with their own dreams and fears. The language, though English, had different words and ways of speaking. He realized that even within a group, each soldier had to fight his own war. Michael began to understand that this war wasn't just about big battles, but thousands of small daily battles with nature, with inconvenience, with lingering fear. He remembered Chicago, the crowded streets, the sound of cars, the smell of pizza. He realized that the simplest things back home became invaluable luxuries here. They don't tell you about the feeling of underwear that's never dry, Mr. Masaru said, a wry smile crossing his lips, or how you learn to eat a meal full of flies without batting an eye. Those are the silent truths, things you only learn by living there. Michael knew he still had much to learn about this place, about this war, and those truths, though not reported in the news, were what shaped him every day, little by little. Chapter 2. The Truth of Water and Mud. In Vietnam, water wasn't just for drinking, and mud wasn't just for walking. They were a part of life, a part of death, and a part of the haunting experience, Mr. Masaru said, his voice low, as if describing a large canvas filled with shades of gray and brown. Michael quickly understood that war here wasn't just about fighting the enemy. It was a relentless battle against the environment itself, especially against water and mud. These two elements shaped every aspect of an infantryman's life. The sound of rain wasn't a gentle patter, Mr. Masaru recounted. It was the relentless pouring of water, as if someone was constantly dumping buckets of cold water over your head, and it didn't stop. There were weeks when you didn't see the sun, only a gray curtain of water covering everything. Michael's clothes were never dry. His olive drab uniform quickly turned the muddy brown black of the earth. His boots were always waterlogged, heavy. His toes were perpetually wrinkled and pale from being soaked for too long, and the dread of trench foot was ever present. He learned to tie his laces tightly so they wouldn't be swallowed by the ankle-deep mud. Mud was a monster. It was everywhere, from the narrow jungle trails to the main roads at the base. It clung to his boots, his clothes, his rifle, his hair, and even his teeth. Every step was a struggle. His feet sank deep, then lifted with difficulty, creating the characteristic squelch, squish, plop sound. Sometimes Michael felt like he was swimming in mud rather than walking. Sometimes you felt like a pig wallowing in a mud pit, Mr. Masaru chuckled softly, a distorted smile. And you had to get used to it. You had to learn to accept that you would always be dirty. That's a truth no one tells you before you get there. Leeches were another gruesome truth. After every time wading through streams or dense, humid jungles, Michael and his comrades had to check each other. Black, swollen leeches clung to their skin, sucking blood. The sensation of them latching on, then slowly swelling, was repulsive. He learned to use a lit cigarette to burn them off or simply scrape them away with a knife. It was a part of daily life, a small detail, but a constant reminder of the harshness of the environment. The weight of the backpack was another rarely mentioned truth. Michael and his comrades had to carry everything on their backs: ammunition, rations, water, radios, medical supplies, totaling up to 30-40 kilos, moving through challenging terrain, under the scorching heat with soaking wet clothes and mud-filled boots, made every step an ordeal. His shoulders constantly ached, and his back throbbed terribly. You couldn't run fast in the mud. You couldn't move silently in the mud. The mud forced you to slow down. It forced you to face everything head-on, Mr. Massaroo said, his eyes distant. Even using the latrine was a challenge. There were no proper toilets, just makeshift dug holes, often waterlogged or full of flies. The stench always lingered in the air. Michael realized that in Vietnam, comfort was a luxury. The goal wasn't comfort, but survival. Survival through the heat, through the rain, through the mud, through insects, and through unseen threats. These truths weren't reported in the news. They were small details, but they shaped the soldier's entire experience. They were invisible scars, yet they ran deeper than any physical wound. That evening, when they stopped, Michael and his comrades tried to find a relatively dry spot to rest. They took off their boots, trying to wipe off the mud, but it was futile. There was only the steady sound of rain, the gentle gurgling of water, and the smell of damp earth. He lay down, feeling his body exhausted, his mind empty. The rain on his steel helmet was no longer a strange sound, but a familiar part of life, a mournful song of existence amidst a world of water and mud. Chapter 3, Faces. In the shadows, you arrive in a strange country and you see strange people. At first, they are just shadows. Then gradually, they become faces. Faces that conceal stories you can never fully understand, Mr. Massaroo said, his voice imbued with a deep sadness. In Vietnam, Michael and his comrades often interacted with the local population. Not always in combat. Sometimes it was during patrols through villages, resupply runs in small tents, or food distributions. These encounters were often complex, full of ambiguity, and unlike anything Michael had been trained for. They don't tell you about the eyes of a Vietnamese child, Mr. Massaroo recalled. Big, round, dark eyes looking at you not with hatred, but with curiosity and a little fear. They don't understand war. They just see you as a man in uniform, carrying a gun from a strange world. Michael remembered one time his squad passed through a small riverside village. The village had been heavily affected by the war. Many houses were destroyed, rice fields abandoned. The remaining villagers lived in deprivation. He saw thin women, old men with weathered faces, and naked children with swollen bellies. A boy about 5 to 6 years old with big round eyes stood watching Michael. The boy said nothing, just stood there staring at him. Michael felt awkward. He wanted to do something, but didn't know what. Finally, he took out a pack of gum from his shirt pocket and offered it to the boy. The boy's eyes immediately lit up. He took the gum, flashed a bright smile, revealing missing teeth. That smile, simple and pure, touched Michael's heart. It reminded him that out there were still ordinary people unrelated to the war. They were just victims, trying to survive day by day. We were often taught to be wary of everyone, Mr. Massaroo said, to scrutinize every look, every gesture, because you never knew who was friend, who was foe. This ambiguity was another truth of the war. An old woman could be a mother searching for her child, but also an informant for the enemy. An innocent child could be an innocent victim, but also trained to set traps. Fear and suspicion permeated every interaction. Michael remembered another time his squad stopped in a town for resupply. He went into a small eatery where the proprietress served hot bowls of pho. The fragrant smell of pho was a stark contrast to the familiar K rations. He ate heartily. The proprietress looked at him, not smiling, not speaking, just with an unreadable look in her eyes. He didn't know if it was hatred, sympathy, or simply the deep weariness etched in her gaze. The Vietnamese language was also a big barrier, Mr. Masaru recounted. You didn't understand what they said. They didn't understand what you said. Everything had to rely on gestures, on eye contact, on guesswork. That only increased the loneliness and fear. The faces in the shadows, the people he met on patrols or in the villages, became a part of his memories of Vietnam. They weren't the enemies described in news reports, but ordinary people with ordinary lives caught in a war that wasn't theirs. When night fell, Michael often lay in his tent, looking up at the canvas ceiling. He thought of the boy with the missing tooth smile, of the faux proprietress. He wondered, what did they think of him? Did they resent him? Or did they also just want the war to end so their lives could return to peace? The rain still fell steadily on his steel helmet, an echo of the truth about people, about faces in the shadows, things no one ever tells you about the Vietnam War. These were complex truths, full of ambiguity, and forever haunting the soldier's mind. Chapter 4. Whispers from Instinct. In war, you learn to listen, not just to gunshots or screams, but to the whispers of instinct, of fear, and of the changes within yourself. These are whispers no one teaches you, but they save your life many times over. Mr. Masaru said, his voice slow, as if dissecting something incredibly subtle. Michael quickly realized that life in the jungle wasn't just about tactical training. It was a harsh school, where the first and most important lesson was to listen to instinct, the smallest sound, a branch breaking in the wrong place, a strange bird call at the wrong time, an unusual silence. All could be signs of life or death. You couldn't fully trust your eyes in the jungle, Mr. Masaru recounted. Shadows deceived, trees concealed. But your ears, your nose, and that gut feeling in your stomach, they didn't lie. Michael's vigilance reached an obsessive level. He was always open, absorbing every signal from the environment. During the day, his eyes scanned every bush, every leaf. At night, his ears strained, listening for every sound. Even in sleep, his mind didn't rest, always ready to react. Fear was a constant companion. It wasn't extreme terror, but a lingering, ever-present fear, seeping into every breath. It was like a coiled snake in his stomach, always reminding him of danger. But that fear was also a tool. It kept Michael alert, kept him vigilant, kept him alive. They don't tell you about the profound boredom, Mr. Masaru said, a sad smile. Long, drawn-out hours of just walking, being vigilant and waiting for something to happen. And when it didn't, you'd wonder if it was hiding or if you had missed something. The monotony of military life, the repetitive patrols, the dry meals, the restless nights, gradually wore down Michael's spirit. He saw his comrades experiencing the same. Some turned to dark humor, making grim jokes about death to ward off fear. Some became aggressive, short-tempered, others sank into silence with empty eyes. Frank, the young man, was quiet, but Michael felt a special connection with him. Billy always carried a small, worn book, reading the frayed pages over and over. It was a way for him to escape the harsh reality. Michael often shared his meager chocolate bars with Billy, a small but meaningful gesture, a silent connection between two people swept away by war. Emotional numbness was also another truth. Michael found himself gradually becoming desensitized to horrifying scenes. Gunshots, explosions, or even the death of a comrade no longer shocked him as before. It wasn't callousness, but a self-preservation mechanism of the mind. To survive, you had to learn to shut off a part of your emotions. There were times you felt like you weren't human anymore, Mr. Masaru said, a hint of pain in his voice. You were just a machine, an animal, trying to survive day by day. And that's a terrible truth no one wants to face. However, deep down, Michael retained a part of his humanity. He still cherished letters from home, still remembered the smell of his mother's apple pie, the laughter of his girlfriend. These were the fragile threads that tied him to the outside world, to his true self. He still caressed the pebble in his helmet, feeling its coldness, like a reminder of another world where peace still existed. When night fell, Michael often lay in his tent, looking up at the canvas ceiling. He listened to the rain falling on his steel helmet, the echoes of instinct, of fear, and of the changes within him. He knew that this war wasn't just about fighting the enemy. It was also a war with himself, a silent, persistent war, leaving invisible sheaths forever. In Chapter 5, The Sounds of Life and Death. You can't fully see the war in Vietnam with your eyes. You have to hear it. Hear the rustle of the jungle, the buzzing of insects, the thumping of helicopters. And within those sounds, you learn to distinguish between life and death. Mr. Masaru said, his voice becoming sharp, as if filtering every sound in an old recording. For Michael, sound became a language. The jungle was never completely silent. There was always a ceaseless symphony of insect sounds, cicadas chirping, crickets singing, mosquitoes buzzing close to his ears. These tiny sounds, initially annoying, gradually became a part of life, a normal signal. Helicopters. That was the characteristic sound of the war, Mr. Masaru recounted, a sad smile crossing his lips. The thump, thump, thump of the rotor blades, fading, then returning. It could be the sound of resupply, of air support, or of carrying the wounded. It was the sound of life, but also the sound of death. Michael learned to distinguish different types of helicopter sounds, the familiar UH-1 Huey, the heavy CH-47 Chinook, or the fast-moving AH-1 Cobra skimming over the treetops. Each sound carried its own meaning, a hidden message. At night, the jungle came alive in a strange way. Geckos called gecko, gecko, echoing from a distance. Frogs croaked in unison from stagnant puddles. Nightbirds called to each other. Gibbons howled, all combined to create a wild, primal symphony. Michael lay still, listening, trying to discern any unusual sound that might signal danger. Silence. That was the most terrifying thing, Mr. Masaru said, lowering his voice even further. When everything suddenly went quiet. No insects, no birds. That's when you knew something was wrong. That's when real fear began. He remembered one time, while patrolling in a bamboo forest, everything was normal, the bamboo rustling in the wind, birds singing. Suddenly, all sounds vanished. A chilling silence enveloped them. Michael's heart pounded in his chest. He signaled his comrades to stop, to lie down. They waited. Just a few minutes later, gunfire erupted, an ambush. If not for that sudden silence, they might have been caught by surprise. The whisper of instinct, honed by the sounds of the jungle, had saved their lives. Smell was also a part of the war's language. The smell of gunpowder, the damp earth after rain, sweat, blood, decaying leaves. But there were also other smells, smells that reminded him of life. The scent of roasted coffee from a small base, the smell of hot rice from a distant village, or the fragrance of wildflowers blooming in the jungle. Even the rain on your steel helmet could change meaning, Mr. Masaru recounted. At first, it was just the sound of water. Then it became the sound masking enemy footsteps. Then it was a lullaby on lonely nights. Finally, it was a cry for the fallen. Michael learned to interpret everything through sound. The footsteps of his comrades, the rustle of uniforms, the clinking of weapons. He knew who was where, what they were doing just by listening. When night fell, Michael often lay in his tent. Closing his eyes, he listened to the jungle's symphony, the buzzing of insects, the calls of night birds, the whisper of the wind, and the steady sound of rain falling on the tent roof. He no longer feared these sounds. He accepted them as a part of his life in Vietnam. These sounds, though potentially frightening, were also the sounds of life. They were proof that no matter how brutal the war, life continued. And within those sounds, Michael found a bit of peace, a bit of comfort, and a glimmer of hope. These were the truths about a sound that no one tells you about the Vietnam War. Sounds that shaped the soldier in unexpected ways. Chapter 6, When Time Stood Still, and Letters from Home. In war, time doesn't flow linearly as you might think. It can stretch infinitely in a tense moment and then flash by like a dream in quiet spells. But letters from home were always a red thread, pulling us back to reality, to the world we were fighting to return to, Mr. Masaru said, his voice tinged with nostalgia, as if caressing an old keepsake. Michael experienced many such periods, long, drawn-out days in the jungle, with only the squelch of mud underfoot and the buzzing of insects. He felt time stand still. Each moment became slow, full of vigilance. Just one small mistake, 1 second of lost focus, and everything could end. In those moments, he felt himself completely dissolve into the jungle, leaving only the instinct for survival. You learn to live in each moment, Mr. Masaru explained, not thinking about tomorrow, not thinking about yesterday, just the present moment. That helps you survive, but it also makes you forget how to live normally. Then there were times back at base where life seemed a little more normal. There were small recreation areas where soldiers could play cards, read books, or watch movies. These moments flashed by very quickly, like a fleeting dream. Michael often felt a strange contradiction. He craved those quiet moments, but when they came, he didn't feel fully present. His mind still hovered somewhere in the jungle, amidst the gunshots and explosions. Letters from home became Michael's only compass, helping him navigate that maze of time and emotion. Whenever a resupply helicopter landed, Michael felt a flicker of hope. He jostled with his comrades, trying to spot his name on the mail list. Those letters carried the scent of home. Mr. Masaru took a deep breath. The perfume of my mother, the smell of old paper, the scent of freshly baked cookies. They were reminders that the outside world was still there, and you were still a part of it. Michael often received letters from his mother and his girlfriend, Sarah. His mother usually wrote about everyday things, the vegetable garden, the new neighbor, or how she had made his favorite apple pie. Sarah wrote about college, about new movies, about their plans for when he returned. Those letters never mentioned the war, never asked him about the horrors he had experienced. They only wrote the most ordinary things, as if to keep his soul untainted by war. He often read and reread those letters, every word. He tried to imagine his mother's face as she wrote, imagine Sarah's smile as she talked about their dreams. These images were the fragile threads that tied him to the outside world, to his true self. He often wrote back, trying to conceal the scars in his soul, only telling good things, so his family wouldn't worry. He knew that his letters were also part of the truth that no one ever tells you about war. It was the truth of sweet lies, of loving concealment to protect those at home. The pebble in my steel helmet and those letters were the only two things that reminded me of the outside world. They were anchors, helping me know who I was and what I was fighting for. Mr. Masaru said, his eyes fixed on nothing in particular. Sometimes letters brought sad news. An old school friend had gotten married. A neighbor had passed away. These pieces of news, though unrelated to the war, filled Michael with a deep sadness. They reminded him that life went on outside, and he was missing so much. The quiet moments amidst the storm, the moments when time seemed to stand still, shaped Michael in unexpected ways. They made him cherish every rare, peaceful moment and gave him a deeper understanding of the value of life, of love, and of family. The rain on his steel helmet remained steady, but now it was not just the sound of existence, but also the echo of letters from home, letters carrying hope and the promise of a future. He was still fighting to return to Chapter 7, The Scars of Land and Man. War didn't just leave scars on the land, on burnt trees. It also left deeper scars on the souls of soldiers, invisible scars, but forever unhealing, Mr. Masaru said, his voice melancholic like the whisper of an autumn wind. Michael's final months in Vietnam passed in a continuous state of exhaustion. After Mike's death, he felt a huge void inside him. The rain on his steel helmet remained steady, but now it carried a heavier tone, like his own sigh. He had witnessed too much loss, too much pain. The faces of Johnson, Mike's smile, and the frightened eyes of young soldiers haunted him. He began counting down the days, the hours, until he could return home. Each passing day was a release, but also a tension. He feared the worst would happen in the final moments. He became more withdrawn, his eyes often distant, as if seeing things others couldn't. There were times, Mr. Masaru recalled, I felt like a ghost walking through the jungle between the tents. I didn't feel much anymore, except exhaustion and a yearning to go home. Michael still performed his duties professionally, but he felt a numbness in his soul. He no longer felt much fear, but instead a disturbing indifference. He had seen too much death, too much destruction, to the point where his emotions seemed to have run dry. He often sat alone, looking at his steel helmet. The scratches and dents on it were now not just memories, but scars. Scars of war, of pain, and of survival. The pebble in his helmet was still his good luck charm, but now it carried a heavier meaning. It was a symbol of what he had lost and what he had paid to survive. Letters from home still arrived, but they no longer brought the same joy. Michael read them, but he felt a detachment. He knew that the world at home had changed, and he had changed too. He wondered if he could ever reintegrate. Could he ever find his old self again? One thing war taught us, Mr. Masaru said, was separation. Separation between those who went and those who stayed. Separation between what we experienced and what others couldn't understand. Michael's last day in Vietnam finally arrived. He didn't feel the overwhelming joy he had expected. Instead, there was a strange emptiness. He bid farewell to his remaining comrades, the men he had faced life and death with. The goodbyes were brief, devoid of much emotion, but their eyes spoke volumes. As the helicopter took off, Michael looked down at the jungle below. The rain was still falling. The jungle remained dark green, mysterious, and full of scars. He knew he would never forget this place, the place that had changed his life forever. On the flight home, Michael sat in silence, looking out the window. He didn't talk to anyone. He felt an overwhelming fatigue wash over him, a fatigue not just physical, but mental. He wondered, could he find peace? Could he heal those invisible scars? The sound of rain on his steel helmet now was no longer the sound of war. It was the echo of the past, the echo of losses, and the echo of a long journey ahead, a journey to find himself again, to heal the scars, and to live with the scars of land and man. Chapter 8, Coming Home and the Old Helmet. Coming home wasn't the end of the war. For many soldiers, it was the beginning of a new war, a silent war within their souls, a war with memories, with obsessions, and with loneliness. Mr. Masaru said, his voice melancholic, like the sigh of time itself. When Michael landed at the airport in the U.S., he felt a strange unfamiliarity. Everything seemed too bright, too noisy, too fast. People rushed by, laughing and talking, seemingly unaware of what he and thousands of other soldiers had been through. He didn't see understanding in their eyes, only curiosity or indifference. He returned home. His family welcomed him with open arms. His mother hugged him tightly, tears welling in her eyes. His father patted his shoulder, his eyes filled with pride. His girlfriend, now his fiancée, looked at him with loving and worried eyes. Oh, but Michael felt an invisible wall separating him from them. He couldn't share what he had seen, heard, done. He couldn't talk about the smell of death, about the screams, about the profound fear. He tried to reintegrate into daily life. He got married, had children. He found a stable job. He lived a simple life, trying to forget the past. His steel helmet was stored in an old box deep in his closet, covered in dust. He never touched it. He wanted to bury all the memories of war, of the pain, the losses. But those memories never completely disappeared. They lurked in dreams, in quiet moments, and in sudden sounds. The sound of rain on the roof, the distant hum of helicopters overhead, or the smell of damp earth. After a rain could all trigger haunting images of deep jungles, the Mekong River, and fallen friends. Sleepless nights were my companions, Mr. Masaru said. I often lay awake, staring at the ceiling, and images from the battlefield kept appearing. Gunshots, explosions, screams, all were as vivid as if they had happened yesterday. Michael often woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, his heart pounding. He didn't dare tell his wife about those dreams. He was afraid she would worry, would not understand. He felt lonely, lost even in his own home. He became more withdrawn, avoided crowded gatherings. He disliked loud noises, chaotic crowds. He sought silence, solitude. He spent a lot of time alone, sitting in his garden, watching the leaves fall, or simply looking out the window. Years passed. Michael became an older man, his hair white, his face deeply lined. One day, while cleaning out his storage room, he accidentally found the old box containing his steel helmet. He hesitated for a moment, then slowly opened it. The helmet was still there, old, faded, with deep scratches and dents. The smell of mildew and old metal wafted into his nostrils, triggering a flood of memories. He took it out, holding it in his palm. It was still heavy, still cold, but now it no longer carried fear. He took the pebble out of the helmet. It was still smooth, still cold. He clenched it in his palm. He remembered Johnson, remembered the crackling blues music from his radio, remembered Billy with his longing for his mother's apple pie, remembered Mike with his guitar and his Mekong blues, remembered all the fallen soldiers, those he couldn't protect and those who survived, carrying invisible scars. I realized that, Mr. Masaru said, his voice warm. I couldn't run from the past. I had to face it, accept it, and find a way to live with it. That steel helmet, it wasn't just a souvenir. It was a part of me, a part of my story. It was a witness to what I had been through. That was a turning point. Michael knew he couldn't continue living in silence and solitude anymore. He needed to find a way to heal, to find himself again. The old steel helmet, seemingly just an inanimate object, became a doorway to a new journey, a journey of seeking peace and connection. Chapter 9. Healing Melodies and Community. The healing process isn't a straight line. It's a winding path, full of challenges, but also full of hope. And sometimes we find healing in the most unexpected places, in melodies, in shared stories, and in the embrace of community. Mr. Masaru said, his voice warmer, like the sound of sunshine after rain. After finding his old steel helmet, Michael knew he had to do something. He couldn't continue living in silence and solitude anymore. He started looking for local veteran support groups. For the first time, he sat in a room with men and women who bore similar scars. They came from different wars, from different cultures, but they all had one thing in common. They had experienced things no one else could understand. Michael began to talk, sharing his stories, the things he had kept locked away for decades. He talked about the rain on his steel helmet, about Johnson's death, about Mike and his Mekong blues. He talked about sleepless nights on radio duty, about invisible fear. For the first time in years, he felt heard, understood, accepted. He was no longer alone. Tears fell not from sadness, but from release. There's a magic in sharing your story, Mr. Masaru said. It doesn't erase the pain, but it transforms the pain into a part of the healing process. It turned scars into evidence of resilience. In the support group, Michael met John, an elderly man with white hair who had been a medic in the Korean War. John was quiet, but his eyes always held understanding. He often carried a small drum set made from simple materials, and whenever he had time, he would gently tap out slow rhythms, seemingly a Native American drum beat. John's drumming wasn't loud or frantic. It was a steady rhythm, like a beating heart, an echo of Mother Earth. It didn't try to erase the past, but rather to accept it, embrace it, and slowly let go of the burdens. Michael often sat beside John, listening to the drums. It wasn't just music, but the call of life, the echo of dreams, of aspirations. John said this drumming helped soothe the soul, Mr. Masaru recounted, bringing lost souls home. And I believe that. Each beat was like a whisper, a comfort, a reminder that we weren't alone. Michael also found a new joy, gardening. He spent hours in his small garden, tending to plants, working the soil. Whenever it rained, he would sit on his porch, listening to the rain fall on the tin roof, on the leaves of the trees. The rain was still steady, but now it was no longer the frantic drumming of war, but a peaceful melody, a whisper of nature, a sound of life and rebirth. He felt a deep connection to the land, to nature, as a way to find balance in his soul. He began sharing his stories with his family, with his wife and children. For the first time, he told them about what he had experienced, about his lost friends, about his fears. His wife listened with patience and boundless love. His children looked at him with understanding eyes, no longer curious or distant as before. The sharing broke down the invisible wall between him and his family. Michael also started participating in community activities. He volunteered to help other veterans, those who were struggling to reintegrate. He told them his stories, listened to theirs. He knew that by helping others, he was also helping himself. The healing process is a long journey, Mr. Masaru said. It never fully ends. But we learn to live with the scars. We learn to find joy, to find hope, even in the most difficult moments. One afternoon, after the rain had just stopped, Michael sat in his garden, watching the raindrops still clinging to the leaves. He took the steel helmet out of the box, placing it on the table. He put the pebble inside the helmet, next to the family photo. He no longer feared the memories. He accepted them as a part of his life, as valuable lessons about resilience, camaraderie, and the value of peace. He closed his eyes, listening to the rain. The rain on his steel helmet now was no longer the echo of war. It was the echo of peace, of acceptance, and of hope. It was a reminder that no matter how many storms life brings, we can still find comfort, find connection, and find our way back home. Mr. Masaru gently stroked his white hair, his eyes still calm and deep. Placing his hand on the old book, he closed his eyes, a gentle smile on his lips, as if he himself was drifting into memories, peaceful dreams, enveloped by the sound of rain and healed recollections. Chapter 10. Unsent Letters and a Promise to the Future. There are words never spoken, letters never sent, but they live on in our minds like silent promises, reminding us of what was lost and what we can still do. Mr. Masaru said, his voice pensive, as if reading an old diary entry. In the years after the war, as Michael struggled with haunting memories and loneliness, he developed a secret habit. Whenever the pain became too much to bear, he would sit down, take a pen and paper, and write. He wrote letters, unsent letters. He wrote to Johnson, telling him what had happened after he fell. He wrote to Mike, telling him about life in America, about new songs he heard, and about how he had tried to learn to play the guitar. He wrote to Billy, telling him about his mother's apple pie, and about how he had returned home safely. These letters were never sent. They were kept in a separate box next to his steel helmet. They were where Michael unburdened himself of the heavy weight he couldn't share with anyone else. They were where he confronted his pain, his regrets, and his unanswered questions. Each letter was a silent conversation with the past, Mr. Masaru explained. It was a way to keep my friends alive in memory, so they would never be forgotten. Michael remembered a letter he wrote to Mike on a stormy night in Ohio. He recounted how he had tried to play Mekong blues, but could never produce the authentic sound Mike did. He wrote about missing Mike's guitar playing, the music that had soothed his soul on the battlefield. He also wrote about buying a new guitar, and he was learning to play country songs Mike used to like. It was a silent promise, a way for him to keep Mike's spirit alive. These letters were also where Michael confronted the larger questions about the war. He wrote about the senselessness of violence, about the lives lost, about broken families. He wrote about the lessons he had learned, about the value of peace, about camaraderie, and about the preciousness of every moment in life. Gradually, those unsent letters became a part of Michael's healing process. They helped him organize his jumbled thoughts and emotions. They helped him accept the past, not by forgetting it, but by understanding it more deeply. I don't write letters often anymore, Mr. Masaru said, but whenever I look at that box, I know those stories are still there, my friends are still there, living on in my memory. As Michael grew older, he no longer felt the need to write those letters. He had found peace. He had learned to share his story with others, with his family, with the veteran community. The unsent letters had fulfilled their mission. They had helped him through the toughest years, and now they were a part of his personal history, a testament to his resilient journey. He often sat in his garden, watching his grandchildren play. They were carefree, happy, knowing nothing of war, of the pain their grandfather had endured. Michael felt a profound peace. He knew that by living a meaningful life, by sharing his lessons, he was contributing to building a better future for them. I can't change the past, Mr. Masaru said, his voice full of acceptance. But I can change how I live with it. I can turn scars into stories, losses into lessons, and memories into strength to inspire the next generation. One evening, as the moon shone brightly in the sky, Michael sat on his porch, looking at the sparkling stars. He took out his steel helmet, placing it in his palm. He took out the pebble, placing it in his palm. He felt its coldness and solidity. He closed his eyes. The rain on his steel helmet, the distant drumming, the blues music from Mike's guitar, and the whispers from unsent letters, all blended together, creating a peaceful melody, lulling him to sleep. He knew that no matter how many challenges life brought, he would continue to live, continue to fight, and continued to seek peace day by day. Mr. Masaru gently stroked his white hair, his eyes still calm and deep. Placing his hand on the old book, he closed his eyes, a gentle smile on his lips, as if he himself was drifting into memories, peaceful dreams, enveloped by the sound of rain and healed recollections. Chapter 11, Peace in the Night Rain. Sometimes peace doesn't come from the absence of storms, but from the ability to find stillness right in their midst, like the night rain, which might once have been a haunting presence, but now becomes a lullaby, Mr. Masaru said, his voice filled with comfort and understanding, like a father's gentle whisper. Michael Davies, in his later years, had mastered the art of living with the past. He no longer battled the ghosts in his mind, but had befriended them. His steel helmet, a heavy artifact of memory, now rested peacefully on his bookshelf, alongside history books, adventure novels, and even poetry collections. The small, smooth pebble was placed in a glass jar on the windowsill, where it could greet the daylight and the moon's glow. "I once thought I had to forget everything to move on," Mr. Masaru shared. "But it turns out the truth is you have to remember. Remember to cherish, remember to learn, and remember to be grateful for what you still have." Michael spent his evenings peacefully. He read books, listened to soft jazz, not Mike's blues, but a different, gentler genre, though still with a touch of melancholy. He liked to sit by the window, looking out at the night. Distant streetlights, the whoosh of passing cars, and occasionally the faint wail of an ambulance. All were sounds of life, a normal life he once thought he would never have. Gatherings with his veteran support group remained an important part of his life. They were not just friends, but family. They shared old stories, not to reopen wounds, but to keep memories alive, and to affirm that they were not alone. John's drumming still resonated steadily during their meetings, a quiet rhythm, a silent prayer for all the fallen souls and those who still carried scars. "Every story told is a brick laid on the path to healing," Mr. Masaru said, "and every listener is a companion on that journey." Michael also regularly received letters from soldiers' families. Not the hopeless letters from the battlefield, but words of gratitude. Young soldiers, those struggling with PSD, reached out to him for advice and experience. Michael was always willing to listen, share, and guide. He knew that he might not have saved all the fallen soldiers, but he could help those who survived find their way home, their way back to themselves. One night it rained, not the torrential downpours of Vietnam, but a gentle, steady shower, typical of Ohio. Michael sat in his armchair, closing his eyes. He listened to the rain falling on the roof, the patter on the window, the trickle from the gutters. In that moment, he felt a profound peace. The rain, once the sound of fear, of dampness, of death, now became a lullaby. He envisioned the deep green jungle, the surging Mekong River, and the faces of Johnson, Billy, Mike, and they were still there in his memory, but no longer as haunting ghosts. They were parts of a larger story, a story of survival, of camaraderie, and of human strength. He reached out, gently touching the steel helmet on his bookshelf. He felt a sense of gratitude, grateful for having survived, grateful for having found peace, grateful for being able to turn the echoes of the past into healing melodies for the present. "Sometimes the greatest war isn't on the battlefield," Mr. Masaru said, his voice gentle like a final lullaby, "but the war within your soul. And when you find peace there, when you can sleep soundly amidst the night rain, that is the greatest victory. Michael took a long, deep, steady breath. His body relaxed, his mind at ease. The rain continued to sit like a final lullaby, carrying him into sleep, a deep, peaceful sleep, free of ghosts or gunshots. Only the rain remained, the rain of peace. Wishing you a very deep sleep and peaceful dreams.